So much testing to do. Welcome back to another episode. We'll take a peek at some 50 series cards. There's a couple 5080s here, 5070 Ti, even a 5070, that dreaded card that nobody wants to buy, that is so horrible for gaming. Well, maybe we should look at it in something besides gaming. Let's take a peek at some of these cards and their performance in terms of productivity. All right, welcome back. Let's take a look at the data from our part 2 video rendering series. And instead of the synthetic benchmarks, now we're going to delve into the actual rendering performance of these particular cards. So again, it's all so that we don't waste our money. Everybody wants to sell you the highest tier card that they can sell you. So what would be best for you to fit the bill and get the performance you need, but maybe save a little money in the process? Again, the systems that we used within this test are outlined in much more detail in part 1. There's a lot of data to go through here. I've scaled a lot of things back because I don't want to make these videos really long, but I want to make sure that you get the gist of the information that I've discovered. So again, here's listed the systems that were used primarily within this testing. The Intel bench, the AMD bench, and that's really what we're going to focus on today. I ran a bunch of things with the Office rig, but I'm not going to focus on the Office rig. Ultimately, whatever card worked best, I tried to make a controlled environment, and then whatever the best option was is going to end up in the Office rig because that's the system that we're on right now. That's what's going to do all of my video rendering. And so is there a performance difference once you up the resources? And that's just to show you where we are. Additional information, please check out part 1. And then I did review this in part 1 about the different cards, the data and the stats behind them. What I've highlighted here is where I think you're going to really notice any particular differences between the cards. Obviously, there are other differences between here, but I think when we're looking at the encoders and decoders, the 5070 Ti, the 5080, they have 2 encoders and 2 decoders. The 5070 Ti has 2 encoders and 1 decoder, and the 5070 has 1 of each. And any differences, I think, might be attributed to that. Plus, you get your CUDA core counts. The farther down the line you have less and less CUDA cores. If I toss the 5090 on here, you'd see a big difference because we all know the 5090, you cut that in half and you basically get a 5080 stats. So maybe one of these days I'll have a 5090 in the repertoire to add to this analysis. Again, the guidelines are the same system, same settings, try to control the variables. I don't want to read all this to you, but here's the information. I tried to make sure that everything was controlled so that the numbers or the differences you see are truly appreciable to what we're trying to delve, what the result of the test we're trying to conclude. And today we're going to look at PugetBench and its DaVinci Resolve test benchmark and manual render times on quick export processes and the setting the render times within DaVinci Resolve and letting DaVinci Resolve determine how long it took. And we'll look at file sizes and a lot of other information. But first, I think we need to delve a little bit into the digital video, the codecs, the packaging. For me, I've been learning a lot, and I think that it was very eye-opening to make sure that I understood how I needed to set up the test. I'm not seeing a bunch of other content creators sort of focus within this, but I think you need to understand what is the video format. And I'm not going to take credit for this. The reference is listed at the bottom of the slide. This is from another content creator to sort of outline. I'm just taking the high view of this and sort of teasing out what we need to get on the same page in order to move forward. There's a lot of information here. But I'm just trying to set the scene so that we're on the same page moving forward. So the format that you see is related to the codec that was used and the container that is in. The codec is the algorithm that was used to encode the video, and the container is basically the wrapper, the extension that stores the video. So you can have different extensions, but you can have different codecs as well. So it gets interesting. So the common codecs are H.264, H.265, ProRes. There's others, but I'm just looking at some of these that I was really looking at. And H.265 is an interesting one. We'll talk more about it later. The common containers are listed for you as well. Most commonly used, MP4 and MOV. The ProRes, MOV, commonly used by Apple. And then you'll see where other cell phones, high digital cameras, all use these things. But as it relates to file size, because how large is the file? How easy is it to edit? Does it affect your editing, your rendering times? All of this gets factored in. So it's related to the compression. So there's two different types of compression. There's intra-frame compression and inter-frame compression. The intra-frame has the highest quality, lowest compression, easier to edit, huge file sizes. And these types are listed for you there. ProRes is one of them. And it was created by Apple, widely used in production. It's a great compression, and it's a lot easier to edit because it was, frame per frame, and there's a lot more to it. I understand that there's probably people in the video watching this video going, this is such a 30,000 foot view. There's so much more detail. My apologies. I'm just trying to get other people up on the same page, and I'm learning in the process. So bear with me here, but I wanted to make sure that what we were testing was apples to apples comparison. Then there's inter-frame compression. And when you look at just these two particular types, the H.264, and it's smaller files, they store keyframes in between the things. So it basically just tracks the differences and allows you to compress the files. And it can be implemented. And then it's interesting that H.264 can also be implemented as intra-frame, but it would be described as I-frame H.264. So it can be used as sort of a hybrid. So now it gets even more complicated, right? And then the H.265, it's the same quality as 264, roughly half the data rate and file size. But when you're doing that, there's much more involvement in your system resources in order to edit, parse through it, and you definitely need the hardware to do this, okay? So what we're going to look at is, what are you using? So it helps you understand what codec you're probably using, and then what container you're probably using. So for video delivery, H.264 and 265 are most commonly used with MP4 or MOV. And so you're looking at your DSLR, your ProRes, your Android phones, your iPhones. All of these are very commonly used. So what I tried to do was scale down and make sure I was evaluating the most common codec and containers for the editing render times. So which format should we choose to look at today? They're using 264 codecs, faster render time. It was recorded in H.264, and then I'm going to render in 264. That would probably be the quickest and easiest, And can the GPU keep up with this data and the files and editing within DaVinci Resolve? And then how big are these files between the inter and intra-frame files? And we could take a look at this, but only briefly today. There's so much information that I've been collecting, the data that I've collected. What we'll do today is we're gonna scale this back to just what we need to sort of draw the conclusions, at least initially. There's maybe more that goes into it. If you guys want to learn more about it, I'll be bringing some more data to you in the coming days. So, but hang with me here. So I spent over 144 hours. This is not a no woe is me. This just helps you understand why I've sort of been delayed at getting some other videos out. I've spent over 144 hours rendering the same two 4K files. I've got a small file that I've used and a large file that I used. And so that we use 4 GPUs, 2 test bench systems. Just for today's data, we're just going to focus on the AMD and the Intel test bench, and 2 4K files. The small is a 25-minute file that was uploaded. It's on my YouTube channel. I use the same data that's already out there. And then the large file is 90 minutes in duration. Both are 4K. The large file is that Keeping It Cool series. I remastered and put all the data together, and it made it a 90-minute file. And I don't know who's going to watch the full 90 minutes. I would love to if everybody watched the full 90 minutes, but there's a resource for future review. And it was basically to bring it all together. And I thought, what a better idea of using a large file than 90 minutes. And it's something that I would routinely be doing on my day-to-day video editing. And then there is DaVinci Studio 20 Beta and 19. And I'm a studio user, so I paid for the software, and we're looking at the free benchmark and the paid benchmark in 19 today, not 20 beta. So the reason I bring that up is that the 50 series cards aren't fully supported in DaVinci Resolve Studio 19. There's a process that it helps to optimize the encoders that each card has, the single or the multiple encoders, to really up the rendering performance. Now, what you're going to see here today is a piece of software that doesn't account for optimization of those encoders, but you will see the brute force horsepower, if you will, of it being able to process the data. So it's not irrelevant, and it is what people are using today, and this is what we have. All right, and so until we get support, and the reason I use 19 and not 20 beta is because the PugetBench benchmark software that I want to use is not supporting the beta release of DaVinci Resolve. So it's difficult. I'm in communications with PugetBench, and I'm hopeful that I can bring you some more information about some of this information. But suffice it to say, for today, you have Studio 19 that is just going to be able to show the raw horsepower of the cards that we're testing today, and using the benchmark so that we're using 19, so it's the same platform, so that we can compare the data, but keeping in mind that Studio 20 beta will be fully supporting the 50 series cards for the encoders that are available. So if you buy based off of today, I would like to say that it's only going to get better in the future. We'll see, right? Let's look right into the software of the PugetBench benchmark data. Now, there's a lot of information on the screen. I want to cue your eyes into is sorted by the standard score. And there's other information I could have gone into Puget Benchmark. Excellent company, excellent benchmark. It at least gives us sort of a even more detailed productivity of what you can expect within DaVinci Resolve. Now, they also have Puget Benchmark for Adobe formats. I refuse to pay a monthly service for Adobe. If I had that, I will go back and test it, but that's not something DaVinci Resolve, you pay for this and you own it. So I'm going to promote them, and I'm not getting paid from anybody to say these things. It's just my personal opinion. So take that for what you will. So I've sorted it from the standard score, from quickest or the most productive to the slowest. And there's some things to point out on this slide. Top performer was the Asus 5080 Prime. Now, I will say that all of these systems, the test bench systems, there's not a bunch of other things running in the background. There was hardware info running because I was collecting a lot of other information from all the synthetic benchmarks, productivity benchmarks. It was all set the same way. Hardware info was running. There may have been an Excel sheet up running to actually document the numbers, save, move on to the next test. Most of the time I was using multiple systems, so I was documenting in one and letting the benchmarks and everything run in the other. So it represents at least not like this scaled back skeleton system to try to maximize the productivity and the benchmark scores. It represents real world utilization of how we're going to use these systems. That being said, the fastest system for the PugetBench was not the documented fastest card that was available. Remember, the Gigabyte 5080 OC Gaming was the fastest clock speed and showed the greatest performance in our synthetic benchmarks. That's not what we see when we start working into productivity. The fastest card was the Asus Prime OC for the Puget benchmark. It It finished that in 5.53 minutes. Not the fastest time. Interesting that the benchmark time and the scores didn't always relate. But the standard score is related to if you are a studio user or not. So this represents if you have the paid version and it opens up, more benchmarks, more. I don't want to get into details, but this is for the studio users. The basic score is for if you were going to download this for free, and they have a free version, and it is excellent. I was just so enamored with the basic version that I just had to support them and say, this is a wonderful product. I'm in. And I would recommend that you do that. Once you start using this, it's an amazing piece of software. And then PugetBench allows you to see the difference between the two. Well, the basic score, the fastest score was the Intel Bench 5070 Ti. That's very interesting, right? The fastest score. And the second fastest score was the Asus card. One thing to point out for all of you Intel haters, the fastest bench was the Intel bench for your rendering times. The AMD bench wasn't as fast. Be that as it may, you're going to say that I wasn't using a 9950. Okay, that's a valid point. It's a 9900X. It's not a slouch by any stretch of the imagination. It's an excellent CPU. And I've done gaming benchmarks, and I've been collecting data left and right. And there's times that it games faster than the Intel. But this just goes back to my point that if you're working with productivity, I still believe that the 14th gen is still one of the top performing CPUs. And I've got the data here to prove it. Now, if someone wants to send me a 9950X or a 9950X 3D and let me rerun so that it can prove that it dwarfs the Intel 14th gen CPU, I'm all for it. But this is the data that I have. So you've got the Intel test bench. The top performer was the Asus 5080 or the 5070 Ti. And in the standard score, the 5070 Ti was less than 2% difference and roughly the same amount of time to finish the benchmark. So that's interesting, right? So your 5080s are right there. Now, the quick export times, this is when you go into DaVinci Resolve, if you want to export the file, I'm going to put a quick video up on the screen and show you how you would do it. You can do it right from the Edit tab, and you go over to Quick Export, and you can click a couple quick settings, and it just, bang, it starts exporting the file in the default, and I chose H.264, and I got my timer out. So I had to actually start the timer when I pushed the render start and then stopped it when it was done. Okay, so the variance here is how quickly or how accurately I started and stopped my stopwatch. But it's all relatively quick, it's not a huge variance. I would say, within half a second to a second, you're sitting right there ready to stop it, right? So nonetheless, the fastest export time for that was the Gigabyte OC Gaming. All right, so now the fastest card is reporting the fastest export time. Okay, that makes sense. How much slower is the 5070 Ti? It's 3 seconds slower. Interestingly, the other 5080 is 5.5 seconds slower. So the 5070 Ti is now beating the render speeds of the other 5080. Let that sink in a second. And it's not like the 5070 Ti this was a one-off. There's some times over there where the scores beat it. Did I hit the Silicon Lottery here, or that's what you can expect? I think it might be what you can expect. So then if you're looking at the AMD side, well, we definitely have some slower times, but the 5070 is not doing bad, right? It's from 256 to 3 minutes. It's 18 seconds for this 25-minute 4K file. It's the small file. And so there's 20 seconds difference in the Intel and the AMD bench. I mean, that's not bad. You got less than a minute difference for a usual 30-minute video to upload to YouTube. I mean, how, do you need to upload longer than 30 minutes? What about your audience retention? I'm trying to get everybody to stay focused and learn what I'm trying to teach. Now, I'm trying to keep the video sizes and the times low, but there's a lot of data to get through, right? But this represents an average of what I normally upload. And if I had the 5070 as my main card, I could wait 20 seconds more. Now, what about the quick export render times? When you're looking at the difference, organized by fastest to slowest, 19 seconds difference. And if you look at the 5070 and 5080, the 5070 Ti and the 5080 cards, between those cards, those three cards, only 8 seconds difference between the Intel and the AMD test benches. Only 8 seconds difference. I think you see where we're headed here. And I didn't see this coming from a mile away. I really thought that would be very delineated, very distinct time differences. You know, what I'm realizing, there's really not that big of a difference. You know, maybe once we get, you know, a little bit more optimization and support for the 50 series, maybe then they'll start showing a little bit more differentiation. But right now they're not. But maybe we don't have a large enough file to really appreciate how much of a difference there is in the brute horsepower of these cards. So let's specify our format that we talked about before, and let's choose a larger file. So this is how I normally collected the data, and this is just the this is just the time and the file size data, not all of the temp, memory usage, wattage, CPU temps, memory temps, all of that. I have a huge spreadsheet of data. And keep in mind, the small files were rendering in an X amount of time. The large files, the 90-minute files, they're roughly 30-minute renders-ish. And the small files were basically, yeah, right? So what we're doing is we're looking at what system. This happened to be an office rig sample when I just copied and pasted in. And looked at the card, what driver we're running, what version we're running, what version of DaVinci Resolve, and the office rig has the latest, and then what file we're using, and the format it was recorded in, the format that we're rendering to, and how long did it take, and what were the file sizes. Now look at the difference here in the AVI Cineform, like the ProRes type stuff. That's 85 gig for the small file, 785 gig for the large file. Fill up a terabyte SSD for the Cineform AVI codec and extension. When you're looking at H.265 versus H.264, you've got 20 gig versus 45 gig. Now, I'm going to put out more information on the actual differences, but we're just going to focus today on H.264 MOV. I've had some issues as of recent that I tried to use H.264 in an MP4 format, and YouTube scoffed at it. It didn't want to upscale to the 4K file, even though it was a 4K file. And so then I had to take it down and re-upload in a different format. So I went from MP4 to 264 MOV, and it ends up being the same render time and the same file size, but then it upscaled fine. So it kind of told me I need to stick with that. And so because of that, that's what we're looking at today. Of note, if you like the H.265, it is nice quality, but you also need to purchase another codec. It was like $1 or something from Microsoft. I know, break you up, right? but you had to buy another codec in order for playback. And so since it's not really supported out of the box, even though it's nice and smaller file size, I didn't focus on that because now we're making people spend money, right? Thanks a lot, Microsoft. But so it's H.264 MOV file, and let's take a peek, just a snapshot at one group. Now, when I'm looking at this one group, it's not like it's the outlier. It's very consistent, and for the essence of time, and this is consistently reported across the other systems. Okay, so this is instead of the small video, and this is the large video render. So it's 40 gig, 90-minute duration, going from 264 high L5.2 to the H.264 MOV, and you get your render times 23 to 25 minutes. So if you're the fastest time, the Gigabyte OC Gaming, 43 seconds slower is the other 5080. 37 seconds is the 5070 Ti. Now they kept swapping spots, and they were roughly right there neck and neck. The 5070 Ti and the 5080 were right there, anywhere from 2 to 3% difference. Let that sink in a minute. What are we spending on these cards now? Let that sink in. And then if you had the 5070, you're like 2.5 minutes longer. Now, again, this is a 90-minute file. You're probably not going to be doing a lot of that. If you are making 3D videos and getting paid for your services and, rendering full-size movies, and yeah, you're going to want something with a lot more grunt, and probably aren't watching this video because for your business expense, you're buying a 5090. But for, us common folk who are looking for the best bang for our buck, it seems like that's not that unreasonable. And the 5070 Ti is hanging right there with the 5080s. Very interesting to me, right? But when you're editing within DaVinci Resolve, it needs to be able to scroll around and do so without a bunch of lag. Now, I was originally, when I first started all of this, didn't know any better, and I was making my videos in 1080p, and you can still make a nice video in 1080p. But once I realized I needed to up my game because I'm showing so much data and charts, I need the clarity so that people can read the numbers, I needed to go 4K because I don't want people to be frustrated if they're actually going to spend the time to watch my videos and then they want to see this data, then they need to be able to read it, right? So then I moved to 4K, and then I even realized that I wasn't going to mess with the 50 series cards. I have my previous videos, you guys know I have a 3080 Founders that does well. I don't know if I hit the Silicon Lottery with that 3080 Founders. It runs great. 3080 12 gig and a 3090. And you've seen that I put a water block on my 3090. Dual active cooling backplate. Runs cool as a cucumber and was running great and still runs great. But when I moved to 4K video editing, you would drag across the timelines and it would stutter and wait. And I'd have to pause, let it catch up, now play. And I'd put a big edit or something in and I'd drag it back and it's okay, how'd that work? And then it wouldn't be ready. Okay, wait. And so I became frustrated. So for that reason, I said, well, maybe I need to start looking at a 50 series card. I wanted the 4090 because I thought they were going to be more affordably priced, right? We all know what's happened, and it's outlined in other videos. I'm not going to rehash it or get on a rant. But, okay, I needed to upgrade if I wanted to have the ability to drag around, edit in my main rig, and be satisfied with the level of performance that I was getting. What you're going to see is I'm going to show some videos of these these cards dragging around, the 5070, the 5070 Ti, and the 5080, and you be the judge of what you can get here, what you'd be happy with. So when you take off the OEM IHS. Okay, so what you see now is a test bench that I used. Again, the specs are listed for you there. Inline temperature sensors and water flow. And then his next video was, he caught some slack for not including the optimum spreader sort of is cut on the underneath side to mate perfectly with the die and the PCB. So the tests and what tests people use for some reason, and you're knowing how it stacked up, what position it came in, leave me a comment. I'll give you information. Worried that I wouldn't see much of a difference. Different duration of time. OCT at 10 minutes gave me an error. So then it's not. I even tried to resituate them and run them again. And then when I got to point 4, I did all of that testing messed up. And look at the KS system, and the KS system was unsure of how to set my bids, and I to a water tank was with my big testing procedure. That's key because it doesn't normalize your temp and just set temperature data like I did with my test bench. Generate this value and how long the test. Out of all of that information, the only thing I ended up using for my temperature comparison was the normalized to 22 degrees temperature. You've got to keep the words on top of your IHS. And it's the same with the coolants, but it was much more resistant to pinching and preventing flow and restrictions. So use that if you will. That's key. Normalize your temp, and you're limited to your room temps and making sure your testing conditions are the same. And there's always room for some error there. But I didn't have the opportunity to set temperature data like I did. I started getting errors point 2. And then I realized I needed to start doing OCC tests and such to see if it was actually stable, because it was when I went to 0.25. So as you can see, the 5080 and 5070 Ti was very little to no hiccups and pausing. I will say though, that because I use OBS, and I guess from the resources and everything, it actually doesn't really stutter at all. There was a little bit of a hiccup from time to time that you noticed. But if you're happy with that, then you're only going to be happy moving forward, because there was more of a stutter and a hiccup on all the cards, because I was also trying to record the response and run DaVinci Resolve. And like, I had a lot of things running then, right? I was trying to record the video, recording the video, working with the video. So it added extra resources and overhead. And I did see some stuttering from time to time, but it really was not bad. It was acceptable when you turn all this stuff off, and there's very little to none. But don't take my word for it. Go off of what you saw. And if you're happy with that, move forward with it, because it's only going to get better if you're not running all this other overhead. Okay. And word of apologies, I thought I was recording the 5070 with audio, and you didn't get a chance to really appreciate the audio stuttering on top of the video stuttering. To me, the 5070, when I'm dragging around the 4K, it's not acceptable. It's better than my 3090, but it's not good enough for me to spend the amount of money I would want to spend more. So this is sort of the main reason I looked into upgrading, and I thought, let's pass this information to you. Maybe you guys can save some money as well. So with that information, we've had synthetic benchmarks, we've had synthetic productivity benchmarks, we've had the PugetBench benchmarks, we've had real-time rendering. With all of this information, let's put a bow on this. Which would you choose? All right, so this is a quick review from part 1. If you haven't watched this, I'm not going into great detail. Go back and watch it. But look at your average total performance scores. I've listed them across the top. And your average total percent change from card to card. So just moving from a 5070 to the 5070 Ti, you got a 17% bump in performance. And the farther right you go, you get less performance increase. So your return on investment gets less. And then based on release date MSRP, now I have to put a caveat. I kind of botched the first table. It said that the percent over initial MSRP, I think it was like 40% for the Asus 5080. That was not correct. My tables were using a $999 cost instead of $1,200, and I think it was supposed to be a $1,200 MSRP card. But nonetheless, your best value right now is the 5070 Ti. They've really jacked up the prices of the 5070, but looking at your performance per dollar amount, it still comes out on top, the 5070. And then in second place is your 5070 Ti. If you look at your synthetic benchmark performance, when you have a reference, you got a 15% uplift in performance. Going to the 80, you didn't double it. It's close, but you didn't double it. It's 27.2 and then 39.7. So, there is a difference here in your synthetic marks. But when you look at your productivity benchmarks, you jumped up 23.7% from the 5070, and then didn't get the same boost when you went from 5070 Ti to 5080. But what happens, as we know, when we went to the PugetBench and render time ranking? Now, I was trying to clean up all the data that we've just looked at, and let's just look at the top 3. Okay, let's take care of the elephant in the room here, your performance per market value. The 5070 in either bench takes first and third marks. Just because you get performance for what you get. But again, the delays when dragging around in a 4K video, it can be the most economical, but if it doesn't offer the horsepower that you want, it's not worth it. So to me, the 5070, and there's no hate here. It just doesn't work as well as I want it to work. So even though it takes the top 2 spots for performance per market value, it's not for me. The second place is the 5070 Ti. And if you look across the Intel bench, the MSI 5070 Ti takes the top 1 to 2 spots in every category. The basic rank, it took top spot. The standard rank, it took second. The quick export time, it took second. The rest are back and forth with your 5080s in the Intel bench. If you're building a bench, build an Intel bench. Okay, I sound like an Intel fanboy, but hey, I'm just I'm just reporting the numbers, everybody. Or choose a faster AMD CPU than I got. That's fine too. If somebody wants to send me a faster CPU, I'll run it and re-report this out to everybody. I'm all about it. But this is just the data that I received. So looking at this information, what is the summary? If you're on a budget and you need to put a system together and you want to do content creation for video editing, Photoshop, photo editing, but this is primarily DaVinci Resolve. If you want to use DaVinci Resolve just to create videos and upload to YouTube, this is respectable performance. Now there are settings in DaVinci Resolve if you want to, if the dragging around and the delays was difficult, you can go up and change your editing playback to half or quarter from the total file size. That would greatly improve your dragging around. I reported it as 1-to-1. Can you drag it around? Does the card have enough horsepower? If you want to choose that card, I would go in and change the settings till your playback is half the size or quarter of the size, or you have options. And I think that would greatly improve how well you were using it within DaVinci Resolve, especially if you're going to use 4K files. So that's a very valid option. And I can't believe I'm sitting here promoting the 5070. I thought, what a garbage card. And for gaming, maybe that's not what you want. It's definitely not a 4K gaming card. It's a 1440p or a 1080p card. But if you're trying to get a good mix, you literally can go pretty well with the 5070. And if everybody else is on the market is wanting to pay these ridiculous prices for 5080 and 5090, and those 5070s are still hanging out there, reasonably priced, find one as cheap as you possibly can, I'd grab it. Grab it. But for me, I realized that the 5070 Ti would fit the bill. It is perfect for what I need it to do. It is one of the top performance per market value cards. Productivity benchmarks weren't far from the 5080. Render times were 2 to 3% of the 5080s. And it can handle dragging around in DaVinci Resolve 4K video relatively smoothly. I mean, it's a win-win from top to bottom for me. And I never dreamed I would be promoting the 5070 Ti for myself, for my main office rig. That's what's in here right now as we edit. The other question that we were going to answer, and there's a lot of the questions that we still have yet to figure out, but the content creators have said, if you have an OC card versus a standard card, should you pay more money for the OC card? And I think from my information that I presented today, if it's an overclocked card for the 5080s, because that's what I had multiple 5080s, you get a benefit with synthetic benchmarks, but you don't get to appreciate the overclocking when you're rendering the video file. So my formal recommendation is, if you're looking for a 5070, 5070 Ti, 5080, even 5090, whatever card you're trying to get, don't spend a bunch of extra money on the overclocking. Get the cheapest one on the shelf. If you want a 5080, get the cheapest 5080 that's on the shelf and run to the register. If you want a 5070 Ti, same recommendation. So with that, there's a lot of other information that I want to bring to you. As you saw, I've got a bunch of scaled back information that I presented today, but I'm trying to keep my video links a little shorter because I want everyone to get invested. So I'm going to have to bring these out in multiple ones. But I did take a look at VRAM utilization, and this, the 5080 doesn't have enough, or the 5070 Ti would be a better card, but it needed more VRAM. Well, does it? I mean, maybe it does, but maybe it matters what you're doing with it, right? I've got temperature data between the OEM coolers and between the cards. I've got power usage for the rendering and the benchmarks. I've ran multiple NVIDIA drivers. God, those NVIDIA drivers. knock on wood, I haven't received like the blackouts, the black screens, all this other ridiculousness that people are reporting. And I'm running two screens. I'm using the HDMI port and a display port. I don't have a problem, and knock on wood, I don't want to have problems. But I did look at what version of studio and game drivers. Does it matter if you render and you're using a game version, or do you have to use a studio version? What's the point? What if you update your drivers? Um, the one of the reasons I put this AMD test bench together, and I'll just let the cat out of the bag now, is that I bought two 5080s and I put that AMD system together, and that Tai Chi board allows you to run the two PCI slots at dual X8. And I have put the two 5080s in, two power supplies, two 5080s, linked the systems together, and rerun benchmarks. And is there a benefit? And I can't wait to get that information out. And is there an impact of adding a water block to one of these cards within a custom loop? And I've got that information, like the data. I hope you guys are appreciating this. It's been fun. It's been busy. But with that, I hope you've learned something today. Thank you for sticking with me. There's obviously a lot more on the horizon. Stay safe. God bless.